So I think we can get started. So thanks everyone for making the time today. Let's get started. So super excited to be here, my first JiraCon. And yeah, today I'll be talking about how you can use ChatOps to help manage your incidents in an increasingly distributed world, right? And firstly, I just want to thank the folks from Trundl for having me today. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak before all of you today. And just a little bit of background about myself as well. So I'm a senior PM at Atlassian. I currently work on Jira Service Management, and I've been looking at the ChatOps capabilities that we've been building over the last couple of years. So super excited to be here. So without further ado, let's kind of get started. So let's start off with a very, very brief primer. What is incident management? Like, what is it anyway, right? So, of course, there's a textbook definition. An incident is an event that causes any disruption or reduction in the quality of the services that you provide, right? And you require emergency response to kind of mitigate and address the issue that's caused, right? And incident management is basically the process by which you kind of deal with incidents. And these are, it could be your DevOps teams or your IT ops teams that have to deal with outages, but the name of the game is to resolve the issue as quickly as possible. So that being said, while that's a textbook definition, this is how it often feels, right? You have all sorts of alarms and alerts going off. You are trying to figure out what's the issue, how many customers are impacted, what could have caused the issue. Was it a change that you pushed last week? How many other teams are impacted, right? And all the while, the service is still impacted and customers are impacted and time is going, and as you all know, time is money, right? So in practice, this is how the day-to-day experience usually feels like, even though the textbook definition is a lot more sober. But while incident management as a practice has been around for a while, right? And incidents in the past could be anything like, you know, your VPN not working, or let's say an issue with an access card, right? But as more and more companies have become digital service led, and more companies have seen evolutions in their own development practices, incident management itself has also evolved. Now, I'll cut to the spoiler to begin with. I think incident management has gotten a whole lot tougher, right? And there are a bunch of reasons that contribute to this, but let's look at a couple of trends that have kind of contributed to this entire practice becoming a lot more complicated and difficult to orchestrate at times, right? Now, the focus here is, of course, in digital services, right? Now, one of the key trends that have happened in the last couple of years is development has shifted from being on monolithic architectures where all the developers in the company work on the same code base and try to figure out who's responsible for what code, and where changes take so much longer because you want to make sure that any change doesn't break the entire monolith down, to a lot more of a microservices led world where there's a lot more autonomy on individual teams to maintain the services that they are responsible for, contributing and making changes in their own code bases, negotiating dependencies with other teams through agreements, right? So there's a lot more autonomy that's come into the picture since, right? Similarly, from the output perspective, this has also meant that companies have shifted from a kitchen sink waterfall big bang release that usually happens once a year, once every 2 years, to smaller iterative agile releases that can be shipped fast and evaluated fast and iterated on fast, right? And that's also led to a lot more autonomy that development teams have when it comes to shipping code, right? Now, it's not just in the development side of the story where there's a lot of autonomy that's coming. Even on the operations side of the house, when it comes to running and maintaining these services, there's a lot more autonomy that's come to development teams. While erstwhile you would have had central IT teams and manage operations for their entire IT footprint, more and more companies are adopting DevOps mindsets where developers actually not just make the code, but actually deploy and run the code themselves, right? Like to simplify it, you build it, you run it, right? So, and lastly, the Black Swan event that's happened in the last couple of years that actually acted as a catalyst here. Now, if you think of all these trends, one of the big trends that the pandemic has accelerated is the fact that more and more companies are having a global footprint in terms of their development teams, right? If you take Atlassian itself, we have development offices throughout the world, right? And if you've seen, the pandemic has actually accelerated this trend for a lot of companies, where it's become more accepted to have a global footprint. And secondly, and this is a new reality that the pandemic has brought in, is that hybrid workplaces are here to stay, right? I know there's this entire debate around, hey, whether you should have in-office meetings or work from home, right? But I think in some form or the other, hybrid workplaces are here to stay for most companies. And that brings its own set of challenges when it comes to like how you coordinate and manage operations and incident management of your teams, right? Now, as a favorite web developer of mine once said, with great autonomy and distribution comes great coordination overhead, right? How do you get these highly distributed, highly autonomous teams to come together and work together when there's an outage to resolve it as quickly as possible, right? And you're dealing with a global footprint here as well, multiple time zones. So things are obviously a whole lot tougher than they used to be, let's say, a decade ago. But that's where you don't have to sweat. Your friendly neighborhood chat tools are here to help you out, right? And let's kind of jump into how ChatOps can actually help your operations and your incident management processes and keep you and your team sane, right? Before I jump into a little more on the actual practices themselves, I think it's important to call out how critical tools like Slack and Teams have become to the daily work and daily operations of any information worker out there, right? And nothing points more to the fact than the sheer growth in Microsoft Teams usage, which was 30 million MAU before the pandemic, to somewhere close to 180 million MAU in a year after the pandemic, right? So if that's close to 6x increase, right, in a year. So if that doesn't show how critical and entrenched these tools have become in our workplace, I don't know what will. But it's not just the pandemic, right? I think as communication mediums, chat tools have a lot of advantages over conventional mediums like email. One is in inherent transparency, right? You have basically information disseminated via channels, and you never have to run into the issue of forgetting to add someone into an email, right? If everyone on the channel gets the same information, everyone can contribute to it, share their thoughts. So there's an implicit transparency that chat tools bring. And the second important aspect, and that's where it becomes, that's where our workflows come into the picture, is the ecosystem side of things. Both Slack and Teams have invested heavily in their API surfaces and have tried to nurture a very healthy ecosystem, and which has allowed not just tools like the ones from Atlassian or any other third-party vendor out there, but also allows users such as myself or you to kind of create our own custom bots that can stitch together our workflows so that we can get work done in the chat, right? So with this primer, let's kind of get segue into 4 pillars that can help you deliver a great ChatOps strategy, right? Now, the first pillar is around getting notified. So given the fact that everyone's working out of Slack and Teams, I think it becomes super critical to know and get notified when there's work happening that you need to be aware of, right? And when it comes to the incident management world, this could be alerts from monitoring tools. So let's say your Datadog or your Splunk or your Signal effects, right? When alerts are raised on them, making sure that you can get notified of them in your Slack channels, your team channels, becomes super critical as part of bringing that visibility into that work into your chat tool. Similarly, the second big pillar is around collaboration, right? And going back to the earlier section around how teams are increasingly distributed and autonomous. Now, the only source of truth that you can have with such a big distributed team with spanning multiple time zones is to use your collaboration tool and creating safe spaces in these tools. This could be a Slack channel, could be a Teams meeting, it could be a Zoom meeting, right? Or creating these dedicated channels where your team can come together, figure out what's going wrong, have hypotheses, conduct investigations, coordinate that actual mitigation effort without prying eyes. I think that's super critical when it comes to implementing a robust ChatOps strategy. The next bit is around bidirectionality, right? So we talked about information flowing from your tools into Slack so that you get notified, but it's just as important to be able to take actions that you would do on your tool or send messages back into the tool of your choice. So let's say you use Jira Service Management or Jira as your source of truth, right? So whenever an incident is created, you might want to take actions on it, like let's say adding a responder or marking another service as affected or sending a stakeholder update, right? So all of these actions, it becomes critical for you to expose these mitigative actions that you can take on the incident within your chat tool so that you don't have to context switch and you can take actions directly. And the second important bit, it's not just actions, but it's also about messages. While you have your team coming together, sharing thoughts, sharing hypotheses, coordinating investigations on that collaboration thread, it becomes just as important to sync all of these messages back so that it can be used for future posterity. Now, this could be these messages being used for a post-incident review, right? It could be things like, hey, this is what went wrong, this is what fix is required, or hey, in terms of our process, we didn't have a way to escalate or notify to these stakeholders, or anything really, anything around any learnings from that incident usually can be teased apart from the messages on that collaboration channel. So it becomes important to have a seamless way to get this context back into the ticket from where you can then do your post-incident reviews or reference it even for a future incident. And lastly, communicate, right? And this goes back
I didn't get that.
Oh,
could you try again?
Sorry for that. See, just got activated there. But yeah, the last pillar that is important is around communication, open communication. And this goes back to the fundamental capability of chat tools that I mentioned about. When you have channel-based messaging, everyone on the channel can easily stay up to date around what's happening, what messages have been sent, what's the latest status, right? And so it becomes important and critical to leverage this to make sure that all your internal stakeholders are kept up to date proactively, and there's this air of transparency around what's going on with the incident, right? And what we've seen customers do very, very often is they might have a dedicated channel where all incidents within a company are posted. And then whenever an incident is posted, all updates to it get posted as threaded messages, and stakeholders, business stakeholders who are on the channel can ask back and forth or clarifying questions. But this allows this communication to be a lot more transparent, a lot more proactive, and fosters the belief that, hey, the folks looking at the incident are actually taking their best stab at solving. So given this high-level overview of like what are the 4 pillars that you need to implement a good ChatOps strategy, I'll kind of segue into how Atlassian and Atlassian tools can actually help you with ChatOps. Now, just a little primer here. We have a bunch of products in the Atlassian stable that actually help you with your incident management process and your operation process. There's Jira Service Management, where you have rich incident and change management capabilities today. Opsgenie that allows you to set up rich alerting experiences and on-call schedules, right? And Status Page, where you can proactively communicate with both internal stakeholders as well as external stakeholders into how the incident investigation and mitigation is ongoing. And we'll kind of talk through how each of these tools and their ChatOps experiences can help you coordinate and collaborate within your teams much better. Now, to start off with, and just reiterating the pillars, in terms of getting notified, Opsgenie has rich integrations with both Slack and Teams that allow you to get your alerts in your Slack channels or Teams channels of choice. And not only do you get notified, you can set rules that allow you to filter what kind of alerts get sent to which channel, which teams get notified when, and you can take rich actions like basic actions like acknowledging or closing the alert, but you can also snooze or reassign ownership of the alert to other teams. But it's not just the notification side of the story that makes this rich. It's the fact that Opsgenie has over 200 supported integrations with multiple monitoring tools. It could be your Datadog, it could be your Splunk, it could be your New Relic, right? And all of these tools, alerts from these tools can easily get synced and allow you to get notified of them as a user within Opsgenie. The second pillar in terms of collaborating via digital forums. So in JSM today, we have rich Slack integrations that allow you to create dedicated channels for an incident. That allows your responders to come together in the safe space, get context from that incident, share back and forths, coordinate investigations, have hypotheses around what went wrong, and take actions back on the incident, whether it's sending a stakeholder update, updating the incident, or sending messages back into the ticket itself, right? So, and it's not just Slack. We also have integrations with Microsoft Teams where you can create a dedicated Microsoft Teams meeting or a chat where you can work towards collaborating on the incident together. Now, in terms of bidirectionality, both within the incident as well as on alerts, we have rich capabilities that allow you to take actions that you would do on the Jira Service Management portal itself, all from the convenience of your Slack channel, whether it's adding additional responders, updating stakeholders, updating the priority, or even spinning off PR ticket from the incident. And similarly, you also have the ability to kind of send messages from the Slack channel back into the ticket itself. So that all these messages are recorded back in the ticket for the post-incident reviews or for future incidents as well as a reference. And lastly, in terms of communication, status page allows you to kind of set up Slack integrations so that when there's an update on a public or a private page, you can get those updates synced to your Slack channel automatically. So this allows both your internal as well as external stakeholders to kind of keep up to date with what's going on with your services from the comfort of their Slack channels itself. And similarly, we can also send stakeholder updates both from the incident channel that gets pushed out as an email to the stakeholders. So I'm just going to pause here and open up the forum for Q&A. Now, like Juhi, were there any questions that have come in so far? Team, is there any questions that have come in the chat? Okay, just checking my audience. Sorry, Joe, I just saw your hand up. If you want, please feel free to just ask your question. Sorry, I think I saw someone with their hand raised up. I'm sorry, when I'm sharing, it's a little difficult to sometimes see. But if you guys have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and just ask the question. That's perfectly fine.
Ananth, there are a few questions in the chat, right? So first question is is from Sajak, like how does someone choose which ChatOps tool to begin their journey with?
I might be having audio issues on my end. Just give me a second, folks. Sorry.
Okay.
Folks, I'll just stop sharing just to see if it fixes the issue. So I'll actually just take the questions from the chat since yeah, now I can see the chat when I'm not sharing. So how does someone choose their ChatOps tool to begin their journey with, right? I think that's the first question that's coming. So I think to start off with, what I would recommend is your tool, whether it's Slack or Teams. I think that's usually an organization-wide decision because typically, like at least with the customers that we've spoken with, it becomes difficult to understand to actually change a decision that's already taken in an organization. It's usually a top-down thing. So I'll just leave that there. Like Slack or Teams, you probably might not have as much of an option. But that being said, I think in terms of what you can build on top of that, now, firstly, look at the integrations that the tools that you work with for incident management, whether it's Jira, something like Jira Service Management. Look at the integrations that they provide out of the box, right? See if it meets the use cases that you have. And sometimes there are gaps, right? Because every customer out there has their own custom workflows, right? Now, at that point, what I would recommend is between if you're comfortable with the APIs, I think there's an opportunity to kind of stitch together the APIs so that you can stitch together your own custom workflows, right? And secondly, I think both Slack as well as Teams as platforms are heavily investing in their low-code, no-code experiences that would also allow you to kind of stitch together your own custom bot easily. Like let's say, create incident could be a workflow from Jira Service Management that you can plug in into your own workflow within Slack. So I think it's a question of starting off with the native integrations that come out, see if there are gaps based in your own custom workflows, and then when those gaps are identified, either plugging them in via your own custom API orchestration or using Slack or Teams native low-code, no-code abilities to kind of stitch that workflow together. Yeah. Sajid, you have your hand raised. Okay. I'll just go on to the next question. why is Assist coming along with the Slack integration, right? Just a little bit of context for what Assist is exactly for people who might not be aware. So Assist is Atlassian's Atlassian Slack and Teams integration that allows you to kind of spin up your own chat native help desks, right? So basically, you can deploy the bot on the channel, and anyone who raises a question or query on that channel you can create workflows that automatically create tickets on your ticketing tool of choice, and ideally Jira Service Management. And then agents can then respond to those tickets from their mode of choice, whether it's the portal or whether it's Assist itself. And basically, the help seeker and the agent can coordinate their back and forth discussions on the tickets from Slack itself. So it allows you to kind of create that chat native help desk experience. As to why it's coming along, I think I think Atlassian, as Atlassian, we do believe that these chat native experiences are going to be critical for our users' workflows, and especially when it comes to help desk scenarios as well, right? I think gone is the time when people would go to a portal and try to file a ticket, finding the right category. I think people expect a higher bar and a more personal bar from their help experiences today. And that's where Assist comes in. And that's kind of why Assist is getting released as well. But I hope that answered your question, Divya. Okay, now next question from Joe. Can you speak to—
sorry to interrupt, Ananth.
Alert/notification fatigue. I think this is a tricky one. I don't think there's a silver bullet that kills all here. Sorry if that's a bit of a bit of a non-answer, but I'll try my best to attempt that, right? So I think the challenge here is because you want to err on the side of catching everything that might possibly go wrong, right? And that means you set up more rules than often is necessary, right? But that also leads to the fatigue that you spoke of. Like you end up getting bombarded with alerts, multiple alerts in the channel. That can lead to a lot of noise, especially if there's an actual outage going on, when alert storms are usually the norm. I think to begin with, like the first level of recommendation would be to kind of review these rules at a regular cadence to see what frequency they fire at, to see if rules can be adjusted, their thresholds can be adjusted to accommodate a little more leniency in the mix. Secondly, I think instead of going for a catch everything approach, sometimes it's also useful to account for seasonal variance, right? So let's say there's going to be a huge amount of traffic in the next couple of days, right? So account for those proactively in your rules. This does require some overhead because you have to go back, maintain the rules, update them, and get them published. But if you proactively factor in variations that can impact the volume of alerts, that can also help you manage. And thirdly, and this is where I think there are obviously vendors out there, and I think there are some investigations that we are doing on our end as well. But there are ML-based approaches that can help reduce the noise by grouping these alerts. This could be based on time similarity. It could be based on topology, alerts that were happening on, let's say, assets or services that were grouped together, right? Or it could be based on the semantics, the description as well, right? So there are a couple of strategies there. While I don't think it's recommended that as an individual customer, you kind of build out your own algorithm to solve for this, but there are vendors out there, as well as there are some investigations within Atlassian itself on these topics. And on that note, I'd be happy to kind of connect you to some of the investigations that we're doing offline. You can shoot me a mail after. But I hope that addressed your question, Joe. And the next question is, are there any effects of ChatOps that a new company should be wary of? I think the only side effect is much more easier collaboration and coordination. I think that's definitely like it's a lot more about bringing your existing workflows into these tools where there's that inherent transparency and where your users actually work out of. So there's less in terms of a downside. That being said, I think the only benchmarks that need to be set are the benchmarks that apply to any other feature itself, right? Who can configure these integrations? Where can they configure these tools? So for example, do they have access to the channel that they want to send alerts to, right? Or do they not? Because you could end up spamming channels inadvertently if you choose the wrong channel. So there are some guardrails that you need to build around access control, just to make sure, just to avoid any abuse of the system. But apart from that, I think there's only goodness to be had by really investing more in a chat native incident management process. So yeah. Okay, so I think the next question was from Divya. The queues are directly getting created on Assist, so it is forcing us to buy Assist license as well. So to that question, like I might not be the expert because I think there's a little more, I think nuance and probably detail that that might be there for the Assist licensing. But I do believe that there are thoughts to kind of bundle Assist along with the Jira Service Management license, so that if you have a Jira Service Management license, all of the Assist capabilities come out of the box without a separate license. So there are works in the play for that. But that being said, like I'd be happy to connect, like connect you to the right folks within Atlassian who can probably shed a lot more light on this offline. So I'd be happy to do it. But I hope that answers your question, Divya. Awesome. Cool. So just gonna like please keep dropping in the chats, but if there are any more questions. But yeah, that's that kind of wraps up the talk for today. I hope like all of you have come away with a little more understanding around firstly incident management, how the challenges, how it's getting even more challenging day by day, and how our chat tools can play an important role in actually bringing a lot more coordination and collaboration to this distributed and global digital workplace that we live in today. So in terms of like any follow-up questions that you guys might have, either for me on this topic or otherwise, absolutely feel free to just shoot me an email. I've just shared my email address here. Please feel free to take it down, drop me. I'm also available via LinkedIn. Like you can reach out, drop a connection request. I'd be happy to connect and network further as well. But that kind of wraps up the talk for today. And of course, you have a bunch of great topics coming up and during the rest of the ceremony as well. So yeah, hope you guys have a great one. I'm just gonna stop sharing again. And if there are any more questions, maybe last call for questions. Awesome. I think yeah, there's no more questions here. So, but thank you everyone for joining the session today. Thank you, Trundl, for having me. And yeah, feel free to reach out offline. I'll just drop my mail on the chat as well. And apologies once again for the little bit of technical issues in between. It sometimes always seems to happen whenever there's a large presentation. But appreciate your patience as we work through that. Yeah. Thanks everyone. And